GT&T mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial star 123 pound. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.
Program which looks at issues of interest to you. Welcome to tonight's program with Dr. Grantley Warren.
As we speak, the National Parliament is debating Budget 2013, the largest budget ever, $208.8 billion. The budget which has a $1,500 increase in old age pensions per month, increased NIS contributions of 1%, marginal tax rate reduced from 33 1/3 to 30%, personal exemption for interest against mortgages, and a number of other measures, including this whole question of property tax and the movement from 7.5 to 40 million is the threshold. Now, budgets generally are numbers, and normally very complex for the ordinary man. Thanks to Christopher Ram and Company, at least that very large document is reduced into a form that some people could start coming to grips with some of it. Notwithstanding, the central question against this program is, does the budget present a focus of dealing with the elimination of the barriers to or facilitating the enhancers to perceived increase in welfare of Guyanese? That is the take against which this program on the review of budget 2013 will be held. And to assist us with that discussion are Mr. Christopher Ram. No need for further introduction on this particular issue. Managing Director of Ram & McCrea, Mr. Vincent Alexander, the Registrar of the University of Guyana, and Mr. Aubrey Norton of the Consultant and University of Guyana. Gentlemen, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you very much.
You know, the very first issue which we will tackle, and we just attempt to get to some principal ones, is informed by a discussion I had with my friend Ram Prasad, who's a vendor at the market. Apart from having to try to supply me with goods which he's not certain that the prices are going to change, Ram Prasad asked me, he said, Chief, explain for me one thing. What does this budget mean for me, for a small man? How does it allow me to ensure I could pay for the children, for my children's education, and when they're finished, have a good job, which pays well? Fundamentally, the issues as we start this program are: one, a living wage for the employed, a strategy for employment creation, because at the end of the day we are talking about people's welfare, a strategy for employment creation. How will I survive in my old age? Ram Prasad didn't ask that. I am including that. And can I expect a bigger percentage of the national pie as I move on through the course of this budget? That will be the first point of focus for us, and around which I would like you gentlemen to start this discussion. Does this budget provide a sense of an increase in the living wage, a strategy for employment creation. What happens when I become old and indigent? And can I expect, in a redistributive sense, that I will earn a little bit more? Those are all the things on our minds as compared to others who we see demonstrably doing extremely well. Vincent, why don't you start?
Grantley, a budget, apart from probably the president's throne speech in any given year, is the major policy declaration of the government. Major in the sense that it covers the entire spectrum of state activities. It does not only cover the spectrum in terms of its articulation, but it provides an insight as to how serious these activities are being considered by virtue of the resources that are allocated to carry out those activities. So that one can look at the budget and get a clear indication of the real intent of a government in the particular year and as a part of an ongoing process. One would normally want to associate a budget with a wider strategy of the government in terms of what it wants to unfold. And so the first comment I want to make is that we are now at the point where we have a budget, but there's no strategic point of reference. You know, a few years ago we talked about the National Development Strategy, and that has fallen off the agenda. We also talked about poverty alleviation. That too, in a sense, is not on the agenda in the same way it was in terms of a comprehensive policy. So the first point I want to make, Grant, this budget is not driven by a comprehensive strategy in terms of national development. It's not driven by that. And therefore one has to ask the question, where is this budget getting its medium to long-term vision from for Guyana and for the Guyanese person? It's devoid of that. Rather than have that kind of strategy, we find in the budget a reference to prerequisites which have been brought forward from last year, namely a strong democracy, reliable and efficient institutions of state, long-term macroeconomic stability, economic diversification and growth, expanded physical infrastructure, high-quality social services, and environmental responsibility and sustainability. And the question that arises here is, one, what is the interrelatedness of these things to a national vision? Two, is this rhetoric, or will we find in the budget itself the kind of policies and allocations to bear these things out? And three, are these things in themselves what is sufficient in terms of the kind of vision that one should have if one wants to talk about the enhancement and a better life for people? In that regard, I want to immediately identify two fundamental things which are missing from these prerequisites. There's absolutely no statement here about manpower development. Absolutely none. And one would assume that in a developing country, that manpower development is a critical element that should be addressed in any strategy and in any budget. It is not one of the prerequisites that one could find here, so that serious issues must be connected to the absence of that. And secondly, it does not speak to job creation. Again, one of the prerequisites is not job creation. So I think that there are two very fundamental things that are omitted from the prerequisites: manpower development and job creation. One is important in terms of having the manpower and the requisite skills and levels of competencies that can in fact drive development, economic development, social development, any form of development, and that is absent. And secondly, it does not address the question of what's happening out there in terms of creating an environment where the fundamental element of people's hope, people's development, is access to jobs upon which you can then build the other elements of development, is also absent. So I think in that regard, one may say that this budget is one that does not appear to be offensive. It does not appear to impose upon people any additional burdens. But at the same time, if one looks at it carefully, it does not provide a vision for a way forward for people as individuals and a way forward for Guyana. It does not talk about the Guyana man you want to see emerging on the landscape in terms of standards of living, in terms of morals, in terms of nationalism. It does not talk at all about that. So it's a budget in a sense which will cover the pot, but will not facilitate any boiling over the pot.
All right. In that case, Chris, what basically Vincent's opening comments basically says that RAM's two concerns are not going to be answered in the budget because there is no question about no dealing with the question of employment creation. It doesn't treat with how one deals with this endemic state of unemployment in the country, on and underemployment, nor does it in particular deal with the whole question of the whole question of a living wage, which he started to talk to briefly. I wonder if you could help, because I told Ram I'm going to call his name, and so that he's looking out for an answer as well. This is Ram Basson, not Krista Ram.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for inviting me to your program, Bradley. It's always a pleasure. What strategy drives this budget? If you look at the theme, overcoming challenges together, well, we've got such serious disputations and disputes as we, your words as we speak, that characterizes the parliamentary debate. Overcoming challenges together, accelerating gains for Guyana. Now, what recently have we been told we are driven by? It used to be the National Development Strategy. Then we were told is the Poverty Reduction Strategy. Then we were told is the National Competitive Strategy. Then we were told is the LCDS. And we get confused with labels. We're not sure. And when I say we, everybody, we're not sure where we are. So now the next thing I would do, I would separate the speech, and you know the minister spoke for 3 hours and 8 minutes, something like that. That's an achievement. But how much could we take in? And when you look at the numbers, because remember, this is about the national estimates. And were there inconsistencies? And Raman McRae has noted some inconsistencies. We talk about employment figures. The minister suggests about 250,000 in employment. The national insurance figures suggest only 116,000. We've got serious problems. If Clive Thomas, distinguished Professor Clive Thomas was there, he would raise the question of statistics. There is nothing that could convince me that we had an 11% decline in the construction sector last year. Nothing. You have, and the minister said, we had a 76% increase in sand production. My survey of importers tells me that over 20% increase in cement imports. Now, surely
Yes,
the
right.
only thing you could have been doing with that
A little bit of
is
instability.
construction. Now, if that figure is wrong by so big, I am suggesting it's about 20% on the plus side. The statement says is 11% on the minus side. That's a 31% turnaround. Now, are there other figures equally wrong? Now, your friend Rampasad. This, when the private sector responded to this budget, they said, this is our budget. Now, Mr. Rampasad, it can't be well, you know, a budget sometimes can be, tries to be everything for everybody. But if you look at it, if you look at the estimates, and this is why I caution people, don't only go to the speech, look at the estimates. The estimates suggest that food price has risen in 2012 by 9.5%. We have an independent consultant who does a food basket for us. That shows 11.5. 11.5. Now, I'm not suggesting that the people in the Stats Bureau have jig numbers. I'm not suggesting the Minister of Finance, but I think it's double digit. I think anecdotal, I think empirical, I think statistical. It's double digit. But at least the estimates themselves say it is 9.5%. So if you had $100 at the beginning, if you were getting $100, it's worth just about $90. If you could have bought 10 things in January, in December you could only buy 9. That is what it means. Now, so food prices are a big problem. You look, yes, there has been a commendable reduction in the rate of personal income tax, because I think it was a national disgrace that individual rates of tax were higher than the corporate rate. It was absolutely, so I think it was a commendable attempt to fix a gross anomaly. There are lots of other things I would like, you know, that I'm sure we're going to come back
Sure,
on.
sure.
But there are these big issues that I feel we have got to deal with. But certainly, Mr. Rampasad, he is worse off at the end of 2012 than he was at the beginning of 2012. Now, is he going to get more income? How is our economy doing? Is it, I hear cash is slowing down. I hear that the drug busts that are being made are creating a serious problem for the circulation of funds. I hear some of our recent guests are busy exporting cash as well, putting some pressure on the exchange rate. We have a lot of problems. I don't think, the private sector said this was their budget. It wasn't a small person budget. When you take the NIS increase, and by the way, I think it's commendable. There was a tepid, but at least a move towards solving the problems of the NIS. It needs far, far more. It needs bolder work. When you take your NIS, when you take your estimated inflation rate for 2013, 3.5, if food price was 9.5 last year, I'm not sure it's going to be much lower this year. Unless you are getting $296,000 per month of chargeable income, not gross income, chargeable income. I don't know what Mr. Rampasad does. He might
No
want
one
to tell you.
certainly doesn't make that anyway.
He is not going to be any better off at the end of 2013 than he is now.
I am a little different to Vincent and Chris. I believe the budget has a strategy. Of course, the strategy is a simple one. A budget created by scams, for scams to benefit. I'll tell you why I say that. I spent a lot of time, I asked myself, why is the focus on capital projects. And I went through all the capital projects. Today I sat down in the first thing that struck me, there's been a call a while now for there to be proper project profiles. Chris would agree. There are little or no project profiles. For instance, you say 1 billion to do critical works on roads, and then they put Suzdijk Linden Highway, West Demerara Road, and a third one which I don't remember. But it doesn't say how much for the Suzdijk Linden Highway, how much for this one. You don't know over what time span. And so to me, they are focusing on capital works with no proper project profiles, which means there's going to be no transparency because you really can't monitor what is happening and assess it, and you can't even determine if it is value for money. And therefore what that does is create conditions propitious to corruption. And I believe that is the strategy, to focus on capital projects without proper project profiles, so that in the final analysis, your hand in the kitty. But I want to add, the foreign policy section of the budget is interesting. And with a foreign policy background, I must look there. When you look at the shift to dealing with China, and in the budget you see, I think China was either the first or second largest donor last year. Add to it Chinese businesses coming. What could attract them to China? It does appear to me, because the West, particularly the ABC countries, are focusing a lot on transparency and procurement commission, etc. It suits the government to shift its business to China in a way in which they wouldn't have to meet those standards. And so I see the evolving of an approach that is shifting us further away from transparency and accountability to one in which you focus on capital projects, you have no proper project profiles, no mechanisms for monitoring, and therefore you create the gravy train to be used to the advantage of the ruling elite. That is my perception of particularly the capital works in the budget. And I can go in more detail. If you go through all of them, you will see. You cannot from this budget say what money is allocated to this, to that. They put them in large, in the project profile, 3, 4 of them, and you don't know. I said you have to go and ask the minister, how much for the Suzdijk Linden Highway, how much for this, how much for that. Roads. You can't say these are the roads that will be done, and the cost of each road. I mean, I am no finance person, but at least you know what budget is tell you. A budget at minimum will tell you, this is the cost for doing X, so that we will know that we intend to spend $20 million on it. But if it can't tell you that, then it is not satisfying the basic thing of the budget, and we ain't touch yet the factor of deficit, etc.
All right. Well, I'm certain, Ram, that you've had some guidance here. If Mr.
Probably
Norton,
unwelcome, but
Mr. Norton is to be taken as reflecting the facts, then there's a certain bit of obscurity. There's no predictability to how this budget, as it unfolds, with its preoccupation with capital programs of a kind that don't lend themselves to the normal kinds of openness, project profiles with appropriate evaluations, etc. And basically, from what we have heard from Mr. Ram and Mr. Alexander, there isn't much in the budget for you. I'm certain that at some stage, and as we take another set of issues, we will try to make good the understanding. Mr. Ram talked about how good it was to see the personal income taxes finally go and catch the corporate rates, which was really a scandal for a long while. I mean, to move from 33 to 30. And that means people were paying a lot more out of personal income to think. Now, much of the budget presentation was a bit of a crooning about the fact that macroeconomic balance was achieved and attained, and the government had done very well. It touted the fact of 4.8% growth with an inflation rate of 3.4%, with balance of payments change of 27 million from 2011 to 2012, surplus of 12.4 million compared to deficit of 15 million in the former year, etc. Stable dollar relatively, I think it was 0.13, etc., by which it may have deflated against the US dollar. Then we had fiscal deficit, however, 27.6 billion as opposed to 16.4 billion, which immediately leads to the next question about what the budget tells us about, is that you have to finance it. And therefore, we have to do some more borrowing to finance it. The question, therefore, this ostensible balance comes about in an increase of debt. And that is the next issue to which I wanted you gentlemen, even as I said, there was a lot of crooning about how well the macroeconomic fundamentals had done. The well within the realm, you know, as it was touted, of an acceptable performance. But we see an increase in debt. And it's the debt to which I wish for you to now turn your attention.
And let me first of all say, I think it's well established among progressive economists that the macroeconomic fundamentals are not indicators of development. They may be indicators of economic activity,
Growth.
they may be indicators of your gross domestic product and things like that, but they're not in themselves indicators of development. And so to focus on macroeconomic factors does not answer the question of what's in it for the people. Because there could be tremendous economic activity, there could be a lot of growth in terms of the gross domestic product, but it may not be impacting on the lives of the people at large. I think that is where the problem resides. So that one has to look at other indicators to see if in fact there is a positive impact on the society at large coming out of a budget like this. Aubrey made an important point that he focused on the physical infrastructure. If I were to say among the prerequisites I mentioned earlier, which one of them seemed to be the one most reliable and realizable, I would say is the physical infrastructure. And that's the one that's most evident, and in fact, lots of people who visit the country judge our development by the physical infrastructure. Roads have been down, buildings have gone up, and things like that. But having said that, I'll say this. It is true that in the project profiles, one cannot predetermine what infrastructural projects will be undertaken. And this here is an issue of transparency, followed by the issue of accountability. If you don't have your projects well defined and outlined, apart from the fact that you might not have planned them, you might not have cost them, and if you're not ready to execute them, it does not lend to transparency and accountability. And so in the sector where we tend to see most of the activity taking place, it's in that same sector that people's development is being undermined because you're not sure of bank dollar, and we're not sure that that sector is providing for the motivation of people's involvement in the national economy. And it speaks to the big question of governance. In the prerequisites, strong democracy is one of the first things mentioned. And here I agree with Chris. I have focused on these prerequisites, but not to the exclusion of looking at the figures to see the correlation between the prerequisites and the figures. And one could see little or no correlation between the figures in the budget and any enterprise that seeks to deal with the question of strong democracy. We don't see on the horizon the whole question of the Procurement Commission. We don't see on the horizon the Ombudsman coming back into place. We don't see on the horizon the Public Service Appellate Tribunal coming back into place. There are a whole range of things associated with strong democracy that are not provided for and have not been acted on for a number of years. We don't see talk about the activation of the Constitution Commission or Constitution Select Committee, Standing Committee in the Parliament, which is supposed to address the whole question of how we take forward the constitutional reform process. The Human Rights Commission provided for in the Constitution. None of these things one could get an inkling that they're going to be dealt with when one looks at this budget. So very fundamental issues to deal with people's development, enhancement of people's lives. One cannot identify expenditure with those things. And for me, that poses a rather significant problem. And therefore, this whole question of the macroeconomic stability becomes more like a mirage and a facade rather than something that really impacts on the lives of people.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
We talked just now about growth and development and the significant disparity. Let me give an example. Let's say, heaven forbid, the seawall collapses tomorrow and we spend $100 billion to restore it. That is regarded as growth in an economic sense. But look at it, it's not even growth in an economic sense. You know we're better, but because it factors in terms of input. Look at the Gaisuko, the elephant at Skelland. That contributed to GDP growth. And look the drain it is causing each year after year. Last year we had to give them $4 billion. This year, so far, $1 billion. Imagine we're saying that it's an improvement when you have to subsidize such a big user of your resources. When we talk, and I'm trying to talk to Rampersad. When we talk about the budget, we keep talking about inputs, plenty money. Where is your output? If Rampersad child sick tomorrow and got to go to a hospital, is he likely to go to one of these institutions that we are voting billions of dollars for? So you could talk till the cows come home about inputs and how much billions you spend. If you don't see the results, it is the output you should look for. We spend far too much time talking about inputs and how we allocate this. If I had to do a budget, I would say, look, what are our problems? And surely governance is a big issue.
It's one specifically for treatment here.
Yeah. So you will have to fix those. But you then say, okay, we have problems with education. We have been spending tens of billions of dollars on education, and what are we getting? Because we are not defining what must be our critical output. We are not defining. I think a member of parliament yesterday said it's no more than a hospital is no more than a glorified health center. I understand a prominent lawyer when he had an attack the other day, they did not have aspirin at a hospital. I'm not talking about a dispensary. You're not too young not to know the dispensers of days gone by, and you would have found those things. So, yes, you could be excited by all these high-rise buildings that you see appearing practically out of nowhere, and yet, and I talk about this, I don't like to use the word dichotomy, but the
Duality.
disconnect between all this fantastic growth and where's the revenue for it. You know, if you spend all these billions of billions every year, surely there must be some returns. Where are the returns? Either in terms of tax revenues or in terms of the quality of the service. And before I hand over, I want to make one other point. We keep talking about the private sector, the engine of growth. The private sector is almost parasitic. Everything it expects the government to do. Even the so-called Burbis Bridge. The government had to do practically everything to get it done. And up to now, the government, and we need to confront this issue, it's waiving its dividends in the Burbis Bridge in favor of the private sector operators who get every penny they earn, either as dividends, as interest, or any other form of income, is tax-free. Where is what does it mean? What does this private-public sector partnership mean? One producing the milk and the next one sucking it? That's not my understanding of a partnership. Go on, Jeff.
I agree with Chris, particularly as it relates to the outcome. You know, when I was going through the estimates and I saw under health, a new body, disease control, Chris would recognize that we had an output. We claim to have invested millions in water. Region 1 and 9 are plagued with waterborne diseases. And so you now say disease control, and you put an allocation. When you look there, again, no project profile. So you don't know what they're going to do. But the point is, it brings out that there's an absence of a vision as to where you want to take Guyana. There's no vision in health. There's no vision in education. There's absolutely no vision. And I believe once there isn't a vision, you will end up not producing a comprehensive plan. And you will end up doing the things you see the government doing. Projects, they fail and you attempt to rectify, which is another element in the budget.
Which is regarded as growth.
Yes, but this is the point I'm coming to. Another element in the budget is the rectifications of things gone wrong. And all of those monies for rectification. I think what ordinary people need to understand is virtually any economic activity goes to calculating growth. But the existence of 3 or 4 or 5% growth doesn't necessarily manifest in an improvement of your way of life. And this budget is ridiculous when it comes to talking about the improvement in your way of life. While I agree with Chris that it is commendable that the government attempts to deal with this issue of the personal income tax, here again the government is firefighting. When VAT was coming, it was the clear understanding that there would have been a comprehensive tax reform, which would have, because if you bring a VAT and you put in the tax on individual products and you don't reform the personal income tax in a significant way, it means that you are robbing ordinary people. So all I would say occurred here is a slight decrease in the robbery of the people.
As a matter of fact, though, but, not as a correction, but clarification. When VAT was introduced, we were told it's revenue neutral. And
Yes.
it's over 60% more. So, in other words, the purchasing power of the people. And when you look, VAT is a regressive tax.
Yes.
Now the private sector says, oh, VAT is working exceptionally well and is equitable. Well, I would like to know what they understand equitable to mean. I hope you didn't teach them that at the University of
It could be easily defined if they are benefiting and they are comfortable. One of the things we must
That's
accept,
selfish, not equitable.
No, one of the things we must accept about the private sector is that it's a dependent private sector. It is heavily dependent on the government.
You don't go so far as saying parasitic.
Well, you could draw the nuance.
And what we will do is that as we go to break, we will try to refine the nuance. We will take a break at this time.
GT mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial star 123 pound. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.
Program which looks at
GT mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial star 123 pound. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.
program which looks at issues of interest to you. Welcome to tonight's program.
At the conclusion of the first segment, we just got to the point of treating with this whole question of the fiscal arrangements. VAT came in for, once again mentioned. I noticed in the budget presentation, Minister Ben was surprised that VAT was mentioned by the opposition, thinking that this matter of VAT was settled. The truth is that the VAT has been one of in revenue collection terms, it has been overperforming, while at the same time, all of other sectors, people are seeking relief all over the place and not necessarily getting it. But the fiscal reform story, is that alive still, or was that, did you hear much of that in the budget or further reforms? Be noted, for the first time in a long, long time, there was the hint of bringing the question of personal exemptions into the fray for purposes of taxes. Your take on that, Chris?
Well, I'm happy to see a return. I think when we remove all these personal allowances, dependent personal allowance, wife allowance, children allowance, etc., we were told, look, you know, it was very complicated. Now you have computerized system, it's much easier. It's being reintroduced for a very exclusive group of persons. It's not for the single mother who got to get 4 children, who got 4 children to try to bring up. She still gets only a single allowance. The person who you know, as they said, the middle class, the up-and-coming professional, who you want to say, getting a mortgage of about 30 million, he has to have a house for $60 million. But that, again, is a welcome development. We have to wait to see how it's going to operate. I would like to see personal allowances extended. If we can make this work, assuming it goes by way of deductions, I think it's a step, again, that I would welcome, but for a different reason.
Mm-hmm.
I am one who believes the government is going to only review VAT when there is real political pressure for them to do so. The point I made about the capital works has to be linked to VAT. VAT gives them the income so that they could do as they like, when they like, how they like, as well as the corruption. Now, I believe there's need for a change in the philosophy. The philosophy, to me, that underpins it has to be one in which you seek while not damaging the wider economy, to ensure people get more income to utilize. If we put that as the underpinning philosophy, then the others can be worked out. Because in large measure, what you want your tax system to do is to contribute income, but at the same time, do not become a mean of asphyxiating or stifling your people. The reality is, at present, VAT is a killer. I went to Harris and bought a tin of paint. It cost me overall 7,000 something. 1,000, I think, and $20 was the VAT. Now, you talking about a poor man painting a house, and on every tin of paint, that kind of VAT. It's a killer. And so for me, the government has to look at comprehensive tax reform, just piecemeal, etc. Let us not forget that the president purported to have set up a body to look into tax reform. I've not heard about them recently, but clearly this demands a little more. And then if you're going to take the taxpayers' money without a proper plan for Gaisuco, without a proper plan for GPL, and say, look, so many billions, you're actually saying to the managers there that you can continue to mismanage, and we got the people VAT money to give you. They tried to make, one of the things I observed the minister did was try to say that they're getting this big subsidy because, so that the tariff doesn't go up. But that is only part of the story. It is the mismanagement of Gaisuco and GPL that is responsible in large measure. And unless we deal with it in a comprehensive way and make them efficient and effective, you will continue to kill the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm. Frankly, whilst there is this talk about in the tax system now being able to get allowances, specifically in this instance for housing, I am very cautious about that. The system that we have, we know the percentage is high. It was high, 33%, now 30%.
Which is still high.
Which is still high.
As the first
But
tranche.
it is not looking at the sum involved, but at the system. It was a much simpler system to administer. And that's one of the reasons why it was introduced. In the old days, you get allowances for children, for dependents, for insurance, for mortgage. A very complicated tax system. It required a very sophisticated administration.
But which responded to real life situations for people.
But that kind of tax system provides many more loopholes for tax evasion and a straight percentage system on one hand. And do we have the capacity to administer a more sophisticated and complex system?
It's just that we got computers.
So I'm not, computers by themselves is not capacity.
But no, listen, look at the numbers of people in the GRA. Listen, you can't say, oh, just simplicity. There are lots of functions the tax system must serve, including redistribution.
But sir, but I'm asking the question as to whether our tax system is in a state of readiness. I mean, there are so many criticisms about the tax system, the administration of taxes now, in this simple approach to taxes. And you want to add on to that a new dimension.
Yeah, remember, one of Rampersaud's questions was, how do I get a little bit more of this pie? Because I get the sense that I'm losing the battle.
You know,
that it is being redistributed to a certain group, a smaller group is getting a larger piece of the pie.
There are different other methods of other redistributive methods that could be used.
Like?
The whole question of how one deals
like taxing poor people on VAT and then
no.
We soaking the poor in this country.
Let's take for example how one deals with education and how one deals with things like poverty alleviation and feeding programs for children in schools, which is kind of restricted at this time. Those are methods of redistribution as well. That could be used, and they're much simpler to administer and do not provide.
And you think that doesn't have corruption?
The kind of evasion of taxes.
I don't agree with Vincent. And I think he's starting from a bad premise. the weak capacity now.
We could
You
keep
yourself
making this
talk about
excuse all
human
the time.
resource development.
We don't have it.
Hold on, but we could put a mechanism, a plan in place to develop human
And
resource
that is what in
capacity.
part you're supposed to see with an evolving
You see, that is
budget.
why I start from the position that we need a philosophy.
Yeah.
If the philosophy is one which says we're seeking to make the people benefit,
Or,
we work backwards.
I tell you what, there are some issues. There's a significant outlay that is going to be made in this country, the biggest ever. If Gaisuku's Skeldon was thought to be big, the one that is going to be even bigger and hitting at the root, one of the principal obstacles to development in this country was, is, and will continue to be energy. The lack of energy at an affordable cost. Amila Kaichor, I as a boy, I mean, I'm God knows running in my 60s, and since I was born, I was hearing about this land of many waters and the fact that we are going to have all of this energy from thing, and grew up with some kind of sensitization to the fact that we are going to have cheap energy. Amila Kaichor, 165 megawatts of power, 800, touted to be costing 800.
And when you take all your add-ons and all your interest, is going to cost $2.2 billion over the period. What it means is for 15 years at least from now, we are not going to have any reduction in tariffs. It's as simple as that, unless, you know, this Amila, as you rightly say, that can be a killer because it's going to drive up our public debt. Don't forget, it takes conservatively 5 years from the day you start to get anything. Your debt is going up. The cost is going up. Now, do we have the capacity in GPL? At the moment, we are putting $11 billion subsidy into GPL. And out of that $11 billion, you know, 32% of it, that is close to $4 billion lost in corruption. And you know, we keep talking, we treat like if it's South Sapphire or Annandale or something. You have big businesses stealing electricity. And we, just like tax evasion, the taxi, you know, Vincent seems to be concerned about the GRA allowing a couple of people claim a couple bits of personal allowance. Let's talk about the hundreds of millions that are being siphoned off. All the children in this country, Vincent, couldn't make up for that kind of tax evasion.
That is why I'm saying that one has to find other distributive means, and one has to have a tax system, an administration of taxes that could ensure that you are in fact recovering what you should be recovering. And that is where I think the emphasis should be in the first instance, when you have money to share around.
But if I may, you talked about the money. Let's see what happens. The overall balance financial operations of the central government is going to be $34 billion negative.
Yes.
We got to find 34 billion. And by the way, that assumes that $20 billion of Norwegian funds coming in. Now, if this budget...
It also assumes that no supplementary
and supplementary.
come in.
It means this, if that money doesn't come in, and we've been claiming every year, 2012 we said 18.4 billion going to come in, none came in. If we don't get that money, but we continue to spend everything else, all the recurrent and the capital expenditure, we will end up with $55 billion deficit to be financed by loans. Now, already we are reaching close to the point where our debt is so high as to be a drag on our economy. Amila can take us well over the falls in a different sense than you might mean it.
Yeah. Look, the last issue I wish to raise, only as we are coming to a close, it's this whole question. Look, we went into an election in 2011 where at least quite convincingly the APNU and AFC and others were talking about the necessity for restructuring our relationships, the way we go about things. Vincent mentioned the question of the functionality of commissions, which allow for a sense of openness and, as he called it, the realizing some of these tenets of democracy and all of that kind of story. Now, the budget doesn't give us, this is the second one since those elections, and yet we have nothing spoken about in the budget about treating with the question of making of the insulation in the first instance of these commissions, which were supposed to provide a sense of certainty and openness in the operations of some of our rights and some of our entitlements. Budget has made no provision for that. One of the major areas is local government. We have looked to the local government system as a governance generating mechanism that brings people closer to the distribution of the wealth of the country, and of course to regulate its deployment. But we don't see any provision. What provisions have been made in the budget for fiscal transfers, for instance?
Well, Grantly, if you look at the budget carefully, there is no section of this budget that speaks in the articulation to local government. Absolutely no section speaks it. And one wonders if you are on the verge of local government reform in terms of fiscal transfers, in terms of the local government commission, in terms of more autonomy. Where is the projection, financial projection, in your budget for the provision of these things in this year? There's absolutely none whatsoever. There's, you can hardly find a word in this budget, and any additional allocation in the budget for local government. And this is all a part of the question of democracy and governance, which is touted as one of the prerequisites.
Look, to me, there's no talk about democracy and governance in the budget. Don't worry with the budget. Let's go past the budget. You have a situation where the government, for the first time, is not the majority. They do not accept that they are not a majority. They operate as if they are the majority. They have no respect for people's vote. And therefore, in their mind, the only thing that matters right now is for the opposition to give them some breathing space so that they could do what they like, when they like, how they like. That is the critical issue for them. I think simply the opposition have got to get together and take actions to establish that we are the majority, and teach the government that when you are a minority, you come and negotiate, and we can, through that negotiation, arrive at, but the opposition shouldn't take bullying from the government.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
Look, I am extremely and bitterly disappointed with our opposition. Bitterly. You talk about local government and you talk about regions and all of this. Our constitution says Parliament shall make laws for the proper allocation of resources. It says as well that the regional administrations must do budgets and submit. Look, I have not heard the TUC comment on this budget. I have not heard any of the regions controlled by the APNU or the AFC. They've said nothing. So I am bitterly disappointed at the ineptitude that I've seen from our parliamentarians. We should have tabled legislation. We should have put forward our budgets. Mr. Norton knows I offered to assist in formulating a plan that should be submitted by at least the regions you control.
Yes.
What have they been doing? Sleeping? It's time to wake up.
I can say to you, Region 10 did submit a lot of what.
I'll tell you what,
And
we are going to bring this to a close. It's difficult to treat with such a major issue in 1 hour. But do you think, in view of all that transpired in 2012, bringing that experience to 2013. And given the fact that the opposition brought particular motions which tried in a real sense to have some of the governance style institutions to operate in a manner that allows for openness, that we may probably be heading for an election?
I could give you my answer to that.
Very quickly.
No, I don't think President Ramattar taking any chance to give a piece of his term to thing on any election. And that is my frank opinion. I don't anticipate there will be
Chris?
an election.
I feel no, but for a different reason. I think they're all afraid of going to the polls. They've all done so badly.
Vincent?
I think we are on uncharted waters, and I wouldn't make a call.
Let those be the final words on this issue of Spotlight.
What a
on
wonderful statesman-like comment.
a review of the 2013 budget with the assistance of Mr. Vincent Alexander, Mr. Christopher Ram, and Mr. Aubrey Norton. Gentlemen, we wish to thank you for assisting Mr. Rampasot and the other members of the public who are direly trying to understand what this thing means for us amidst all of the dysfunctionalities that they see every day, not knowing from one moment to the next whether in fact where we are going and how we're planning to get there. Thanks very much for enlightening our audience. I'm Grantley Waldron saying good night from Spotlight.
Thanks.
GT&T mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial star 123 pound. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.